So there's a lot of applications, obviously, in oil and gas, particularly in upstream, things that are just very, very data compute heavy. Things that kind of come to mind for me is that tools like TIBCO Spotfire have kind of become the tool of choice for a lot of E&Ps. It seems like everybody, at least one department's using them. I think the mistake that a lot of them make is that they build it in a way to where you're doing a lot of computations in Spotfire, which is not necessarily built to use, and so therefore the data visualization is, like you said, extremely laggy and takes forever to kind of generate these models. So there's a lot of use cases there, and we could probably talk about that forever. I'm interested though to see where you guys looking. Obviously, like this energy transition thing seems to be kind of like top of mind, and I'm curious where an organization like Nvidia, like you guys probably have a lot of data and research, and where are you seeing kind of movement in other forms of energy? And where are you guys going to be focusing your attention?
So that's a great question, right? Clearly oil and gas is going to be around for our lifetime.
It's not going anywhere, guys. Right? Just going to preface it by saying that.
So, the thing is there, it's twofold. It's how do we help oil and gas become as clean as possible? Mm-hmm. And we can do that through all different kinds of things. On the surface side of things, even now with cameras for emission detection and, those types of things. But then as the world evolves and more distributed energy resources come online, right? About, the statistic I always hear is the world's energy needs are going to double by 2050. So in the next 30 years. And chances are, at best case scenario, oil and gas will remain flat, right? So that still means we have to come up with the equivalent of all the natural gas and coal type electricity over the next 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, right now, hydrocarbons account for 63% of electricity generation.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty heavily weighted distribution.
Yeah. And eventually, if the world's electricity needs are going to double, or power needs are going to double in the next 30 years, we can't double fossil fuel energy production, right? I just don't see that happening.
Yeah.
So there's going to be the introduction of wind and the introduction of more solar and nuclear options with molten salt reactors and cleaner nuclear type solutions and hydro and geothermal and all of that. So, the thing about all of those are generating the power for those. You can do a lot in the form of performance asset management, predictive maintenance, stability, simulation to see, how do you get the most out of those assets? Mm-hmm. But the bigger question is once you go from having, let's say in the US, 8,000 power generation spots to over 1 million, right? When you add in everybody's solar panels on the roof, you add in all wind, you add in batteries, you add in all of these things, all of a sudden the electric grids, they're not meant, they weren't built for that kind of smarts, right? And it's, I compare it a lot to 5G, right? Eventually you think about when things slow down with the network because you might have a baseball game going on and everybody's filming stuff and now they're high resolution, three cameras on your phone and you're uploading it to the here and there, and all of a sudden the networks become overloaded. Well, the same thing's going to happen with the energy grids, right? If you think about the smarts that need to go in to basically take all these distributed energy resources and know what you buy from somebody who's generating that electricity, how you route it through. But more and more, it's not going to be a one-way direction, right? If you have a house with solar panels,
it's coming back,
and you're on vacation, you're going to be feeding the grid the week while you're gone, right? Or if you have excess capacity, you're going to be feeding the grid, and you don't want to buy a bunch of electricity from somebody who's generating it from natural gas when you have to take it from somebody who has solar, right? Or it doesn't make sense to. Right. So ultimately, you're going to have to try to predict where the energy is going to be coming from, how to move it, how to have the right infrastructure so you don't overpower power lines. You don't, the big thing in that industry is I'm learning a lot. I've never been in the utility space, but I've spent a lot of time with customers and industry consortia to understand that it's all about reliability and predictability. And if you overproduce too much electricity, you waste it. Right? Because there's not enough battery storage today and all of that.
Yeah.
If you underproduce, then you have blackouts.
Yeah.
Right? So you've got to be pretty accurate.
You have to have a balance. Yeah.
You have to have a balance.
Yeah. I've seen so many statistics on what it would cost to completely renew, I guess, or redo the entire energy grid here in the U.S. And so the most popular number I've seen is like $14 trillion,
Well,
which is
it's not even
huge.
it's not even about, completely rebuilding the energy grid. These problems that Mark brings up, in my mind, distribution's everything. And I think that that's where the bulk of technology is going to be developed, is figuring out you have all these individual dislocations in the market, all these distributed energy points, just with like your next door neighbor with the energy panels that went on vacation for 2 weeks, and figuring out how to deal with all of those things. And I don't think like you could just today say, hey, we're going to rebuild the energy grid and we're going to build it for this. I think that you have to figure out how to connect all of these individual systems. And the point that he brought up is it's always a balance. You don't want too much, you don't want a surplus, and you don't want a deficit. And how do you do that? And I imagine that people are coming out with predictive analytics and artificial intelligence that helps balance that. But it's an extremely complex problem. Like everyone just thinks that, if you talk to these people outside oil and gas, like, oh, just get some solar panels and some windmills and we're off oil and gas. And it's not that easy. You have to think about all of these issues. And I'm sure computing and technology is going to play a massive part in that.
California better figure it out pretty quickly. I mean, they just banned internal combustion engines in like 2035 or something. And so, but they're currently experiencing rolling blackouts.
Right.
Yeah. You get 100-degree day there and the grid goes out. It's not reliable. And that's what matters, is reliability, right?
That's absolutely right. And what I would tell you is that people are looking at it, right? I spent some time with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratories. The last couple of weeks, we've been having discussions about, where are they getting funding, right? What are companies paying them to research, and how do we step in and help them to solve some of these problems? And, ultimately, I think that that people are thinking a lot about this. And to your point, Jake, about the $14 trillion to replace the grid, they're not going to do that all at once, but also predicting where you should start and what should be next, right? What are those highly critical areas that are going to start to see problems? AI can predict that, right? They have the data. The data's there. The question is how do you process it in real time, and how do you process it at all? Because in the past, the computing infrastructure couldn't do it, right? Similar to oil and gas, right? They've got more data than they can possibly look through. And, once again, with AI, you can take that data and basically stream it down into a digestible, amount, right? And categorize it and actually look for trends or anomalies that you can start to take action on.
Yeah, I think the ironic thing about this too is you talk about all the computing power that this is going to take and the energy consumption that it would require. You're going to increase energy demand just for the amount of data that we're crunching in a real time basis. So
you look like Bitcoin mining farms. Like the biggest issue is heating.
Right.
It just gets too damn hot.
Yeah.
But you look at that, and I've seen, like, I'm a big Bitcoin fanboy, and you don't need your opinion on it. I know a lot of people bash that, but you even look at Bitcoin mining. I mean, I can't spout off the statistics on top of my head, but if you look out to 2030, 2040, just the energy that it would take to continue mining Bitcoin, I mean, it's pretty substantial. And so you think about these things too, is as we're computing all of this data and crunching this data, there's a huge burden on the grid,
right,
just to do that process.